On 2 planes today to get back here for this, so if I'm a little bit kind of more casual about that, it's just because my brain's still at like 30,000 feet, so it's not I like that. Okay, I'm talking about where maker culture came from. I'm just really quickly, show of hands, put your hands up. Who here identifies as a maker? Now tell me, what does that mean? Anyone can tell me what that means? Whatever it feels like. I like that too. Go ahead. Okay, I'm going to let you say that into the microphone.
I've understood the 3 stages of alchemy. For all you Full Metal Alchemist fans, understanding, destroying, which I love destroying, but also creating. Yay.
Thank you. I think that's deep. That's too deep for me. So I'm just going to talk about making it at the general level. My friend here screamed out hacking, and we're going to talk about kind of hacker culture as well. So let's jump into it. But before I start, I'm going to ask you guys, if you've got some questions, if you've got some photos, anything like that, feel free to use Twitter. My phone's in my pocket, and if I get a chance, I will definitely see if I can answer your questions. You can always hashtag me in, as well as BuzzConf, and all the information's above my head. So we all know about making through an area called, hang on, we all know making, the clicker's not working, through an idea of, and a space called a makerspace. Anyone here familiar with makerspaces? Been to a makerspace? Right? These are places where collective communities grow and are fostered, and people get the ability to create and make things. It sounds really interesting, but this really comes out of an idea of which I call maker culture. And maker culture is really about the idea of making things that we can hold in our hand. And this goes back to a whole educational system where people go to school and they learn things, but they learn things formally. Anyone here ever learned something out of a book and never apply it into their life? Right? That's everyone. I'm telling you, from where I'm standing, most people just put their hands up. I'm still trying to work out how I can actually apply half of my space and number courses that I did in year 11 and year 12, because apart from the basics that I learned, and I'm sure all of you did as well, how to do formula, but didn't understand the application of it. Because someone decided that that is a good way of teaching if we break down the problem, but it never really connected. Well, maker culture connects everything to an actual outcome. And that's what makes it so powerful. But where did it come from? Where did this idea of being able to go out and share knowledge, equipment, actually originate? And I was thinking about this, and from doing some research, turn it down, ask them to turn it down. Looking back in the past and trying to understand where this came from, the earliest link that I can find is actually in, it's not doing it, thank you, in hippie culture. The idea that everything's open and everything's free. If you think about the whole idea of what you can do in a makerspace or within maker culture itself, people will help you understand the things you don't know. And not only that, you don't learn it formally. Yeah, you might go on the internet, you might look at a wiki event, or you might go to GitHub and get some code and have an idea, but you're actually applying it. It's actually applied learning, which changes the whole rules of how education works. And in fact, this is the way we as people are designed. Our whole lives about experience. It's not about learning through reading and then having that knowledge and hoping one day we'll be able to do something. In fact, if you look at most university courses, most people get degrees and are called experts before they actually get the chance to actually apply it. And that's not a bad thing until you actually apply it and realize that there's a whole range of stuff that needs to be put into place beforehand. Just because you understand it out of a book does not mean that you have gone through that experience. And anyone who's ever made anything here will learn that the experience that you get out of that is by failing and understanding what doesn't work that leads you into the answer that does. It's a really interesting pedagogy that what making brings. Coming back to hippie culture, that idea of being able to, if I know something, doesn't mean you shouldn't have to know something. In the wider world, especially when it comes to economics and business, we talk about things like IP, right? We have to lock that IP off because we do something that has a value. Well, that seems to disappear within maker culture. And that actually opens the door to not just creation, but possibility. And possibility is the thing that drives this world. So looking at this, one of the first examples that really came out of hippie culture that I really like is a guy by the name of, let's see if it works. Let me just press this button. John Dapper, Captain Crunch. Anyone ever heard of this guy? Yeah, Andy, I was thinking of you when I actually was putting this together, and a few other people said yes. I'm just going to put this down. So Captain Crunch was one of the first hackers that was really kind of was brought up to the mainstream. The news, the entertainment industry, media really latched onto him because he worked out the Bell, which was the phone system in the US. And using a small whistle that was found in a Captain Crunch box, he worked with actually blind people who could hear the tones, and they were able to identify the tones that would actually open up long distance calls. And they realized that this whistle would allow people to make long-distance calls on the system, and you could go up to any phone and blow this whistle and be able to open up a call. And he's famous for actually routing calls all around the world and then calling a payphone right next to him. So this is where the traditional idea of a hacker, someone who goes in and kind of disrupts the system, comes from. But really what he was an explorer. There was all this information in the phone system that he was curious about and understood, but didn't have the legitimate reason or a pathway to learn. So that's what John Dapper did. You can see the guys up the top. A lot of these people also went on to work at, not work, but they also went on to be part of things like the Homebrew Computer Club, which if we didn't have that today, we wouldn't be all walking around with iPhones and laptops in our bags. So these are the real pioneers, and this is where this idea of hacking came from. It was more about exploring the system. And that leads into spaces where people can actually do this. In the 80s, they had these hack spaces, which were software engineers who were writing programs, and just really quickly, I know, I was going to say, you'll know the answer, but does anyone know the inherent strength of a computer? There's one thing a computer does better than any other machine or process on the planet.
Mac or PC?
Both is the answer. Sorry? Recursion. Yeah. Can I turn it into English for everyone else? Great. So what a computer does, and it's inherent to the system, is it can make multiple copies of information instantaneously. It's not a hardware issue, it's a software one. Which means that if I write a program, I can make thousands of copies, literally, and that's how a lot of software engineers today and companies distribute their software. But back in the 80s, there was a floppy disk, and if I bought a floppy disk for $400 to do my spreadsheets, and I gave it to Andy, or I gave it to Rick, or I gave it to you, there was no way for the computer to know that it was a copy. So a lot of these software engineers created these electronic labs, these hack spaces, where they were able to create little dongles that sat at the back of the computer and did a sum check to say, if that sum check is not present, don't run the program. And it was a way for them to actually secure their IP. And these places, these hack spaces, weren't maker spaces as we know it today. These were labs where they were taking pre-existing items and actually changing them for another purpose. So the idea was they were taking electronics and hacking them into another source. And this is really kind of where a lot of software labs would have these spaces, these little hack spaces, and people would start, I'm reverbing a bit, but people would actually come, sorry, okay, that's a little bit better. People would actually come in and start changing the iteration of existing products and coming in and fixing up things like stereos and modifying them, which takes us to the next iteration of makerspaces, which is Fab Labs. And Fab Labs came out of MIT. MIT actually had a program where they put together, where they really wanted to empower people to be able to create and make a whole lot of stuff using non-traditional methods or non-traditional machinery. So we're talking about CNC, we're talking about computer-controlled devices, we're talking about lathes, we're talking about 3D printers in the early days. And this goes on today. I don't believe we have a Fab Lab in Melbourne, but we do have one in Adelaide, and they are actually funded to a certain degree from MIT in the US. And these are places where you go and get an induction on some equipment, and then you are actually able to run your own project as such. And one in Sydney, okay, I wasn't, and Brisbane, there you go. And Perth. So we're missing. Why do we not have a Fab Lab in Melbourne is what I'm saying. I think there's at least 5 people in here who know what's going on. So that's the challenge I'm putting down today.
We've got Andy.
These two ideas have really formed a third one, which is what we were talking about today, which is a makerspace. And makerspaces, all these ideas, these hack labs, these hacker spaces, the fab labs, the makerspaces, these terms are used kind of intermixed. People set up these incredible spaces, and we have someone here today who's setting one up in Sunshine as places for people to be able to go out and actually share what they know, learn, collaborate, and create. And that's kind of amazing. And when people say to me, what's the real core of these spaces and make a culture, I really think it's this. This is really what it's about. I love this photo. This photo was taken at a event called Mini Make Day, which was held at Library at the Dock in the city. And this is an electronics class, a beginner's electronics class. To me, this is what is the incredibly powerful equalizer of maker culture. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter what sex you are. It's a decathlon of the mind. So if you are able to go and have those tools, you can then express yourself in any way, shape, or form. And we have two people here who I don't actually believe that they know each other, that really sum up what maker culture can do, not just for us, but for everyone. And it really, truly is open for everyone. Oh, that's a blurry picture. Okay, I thought I drank too much. But, it doesn't matter who you are. That idea of understanding and information is really the strength that comes through with maker culture. And it's actually the ability to create possibilities in a much wider domain. And it's also about sharing and caring. And in fact, if you were here last week, I believe the person in that lower corner did a talk. Andy, if a few people knew. So maker culture is just all about being able to share what you know and then being able to transform that into expression. I call that being able to express someone's personal narrative. So what does this mean to industries? What's this mean? Like, what's all of this mean? I like to ask the question, what's this mean to the world in general? Because we're not just talking about making cool stuff. We're actually talking about empowering people and a generation. And that's actually happening right now with the Australian curriculum. There's this thing called the K-12, which is a digital curriculum where if you take a look at it, it's based all in maker culture. These kids are going to be able to go out and understand how to fabricate things using 3D printers and CNC mills and codes that most people in this room didn't get a chance to until they went to formal university or taught themselves. So I like this quote. This is a quote by Robert Rodriguez. I don't know if you know him. He's a filmmaker. See some of the films that he's made down below. He said, if you're just creative, you always have to rely on someone else to be technical. But if you're creative and technical, you're absolutely unstoppable. And that's what I see all the time when I go into these spaces. I see people who are technical. I see people who are creative. And I've seen these incredible projects that they've put together that just light people who have no idea that this stuff is going on. In fact, if you look at Kickstarter, all the projects I believe that are funded on Kickstarter, it's not funded on because they had a great idea. It's funded because it meant something to the people who were creating it, and they were able to express that across. There's a reason why Kickstarter funds don't work unless the video is sharp and communicative. So keep that in mind next time you're on Kickstarter. Ask yourself, why did you put some money towards it? Was it just to get the object at the end? Or was it a combination of a really cool idea that meant something to someone and you were able to help them on their journey? Which again, ties straight back. Yep, I want to show you really quickly. Everyone who's seen this before, RoboHand. This is a prosthetic hand on a 3D printer. This came out of South Africa. A gentleman cut his fingers off accidentally as he was a carpenter, and he didn't know how he was going to get a prosthetic hand because they wanted $40,000 to replace 4 fingers, and he was able to do it for $40 on a 3D printer. And this actually inspired a whole lot of people to go out and start printing limbs for people who weren't able to actually get medical prosthetics. And you can see some of the examples there in Africa. Africa, they're after clean water. They don't have time for prosthetics and stuff like that. And if you're caught up in a war, step on a landmine, that's tough. That's the way the world works. But most people know about this, but I want to share this one with you as well. This is a accelerator run by Disney. And in the first time, they actually realized that they had an opportunity here to provide prosthetic limbs for kids. 4 fingers was $40. Can you imagine what an arm or a forearm for a child would cost? And just to let you know, the prosthetic industry in the traditional medical, they don't do that. you have to be 25 or over to get a limb because you keep growing until that point. So Disney decided that they were going to develop this idea using their brands Marvel, Frozen, and Star Wars, and in doing so was able to answer a whole need that the traditional market wasn't going to be able to do that. Only because makers went out there and proved time and time again there was a need and there was a workflow that worked. This did not happen overnight. We're looking at 10 years. When it comes to big business, I like this example as well. These two gentlemen happened to set up one of the world's biggest computer companies. You've got Hewlett and Packard, and where did they get their first break? It was in that little shed, their own little makerspace, that actually the company just went and bought and saved in Silicon Valley. So these guys went on to create all of their products, literally from their first product that they actually made and tinkered, that they actually, ironically, sold to Walt Disney. So you can see this is a great example over years where this comes from. And we've got hundreds of examples of that. I'm sure you all know the guys who started Apple. All these people were driven to express themselves through technology, and they were surrounded by people who were able to do it. If you're new to the makerspace and maker culture industry, I definitely want to invite you to check out a series that's on YouTube that I put together called Makers Monday. It's a 2-minute interview with makers all around the world. And what I love about this is you get to see what other people are doing. Again, I think that's Andy up at the top right-hand corner. If you're interested in that, just go search. Andy's a friend of mine, so I'm going to embarrass the hell out of him today. But I'm sure you'll love me. Payback will happen. It already has. It's okay. So if you're interested, please check it out on YouTube. Just search Makers Monday. My name's Gil Poznanski. My friends call me the Coach of Tony Stark. I'm very passionate about what's going on in the maker culture, and I like to be a little bit of an evangelist towards that. So I want to thank you all for hearing me out today, and I want to look forward to seeing all of you at BuzzConf. Thank you so much.